the game.
Hi, I'm Kelsa Dickey, the CEO of the Financial Coach Academy and my financial coaching business, Fiscal Fitness Phoenix. My coaching journey began more than a decade ago with me helping people for free from my dining room table. What was once a little business of mine has grown into a 7-figure company that employs a team of people. My goal is simple, to help you fall more and more in love with financial coaching. I believe financial coaching is the most rewarding way to make a living. If you are an aspiring financial coach or have been coaching for years, I'm here to help you create a business you love that gets your clients massive results. Let's get to it.
Hey, financial coach. Welcome to episode 60 of the podcast. We're going to dive into your client's financial progress number today. But first, a review that was left for the podcast from Preservation Gal Katie. Katie says, I think I found my passion. Haley and Justin from Price of Avocado Toast podcast turned me onto this podcast, and I am so happy they did. I'm so happy they did too. Hey, Haley and Justin. I am only on episode 2, and that made me laugh so hard. Katie, you got a long way to go. Keep binging. But so far, I'm hooked, she says. Excited to learn as much as I can on this new journey. I am so excited for you too, Katie. Thank you for taking the time to be a listener, but also to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate it. All right, coaches, I thought we would talk about one of the financial concepts that I use at Fiscal Fitness to coach my clients on their money. And I hope you like this analysis and approach, and feel free to incorporate it into your coaching sessions as well. And I love geeking out on money, so we're going to do that, but let's also geek out together on the coaching side of money as well, because I think they both are equally important. You may have heard of the idea of a savings rate before. Your savings rate was where today's topic, your financial progress number, remember, it's where it originated. And also when I constructed this concept, as with every other concept that I coach my clients on, I use the coaching framework that I designed from episode 17 of this podcast. So go check that out as well. Today, you're going to see it in action, which I hope you will enjoy. I literally love this part of what I do. I feel like the episodes where I teach a financial concept with a coaching element is totally my jam. I could do this all day, seriously, and never tire of it. All the business strategy stuff that I talk about in this podcast so that I can be a financial coach is stuff that I enjoy as well. But this is the part of my business that I've always enjoyed and always geeked out on. The business side of things is the stuff where it's I have to get good at that, and I've learned to love it so that I can be a financial coach. But I am a financial coach. This is the kind of stuff that I love sharing. So you'll have to let me know if you can tell by my voice in this episode if I sound different or giddy or anything else, because I kind of feel like I might. I have learned to love all aspects of this journey, but this is the stuff that I have loved instantly, and I didn't have to learn to love this stuff. So I hope that makes sense. Let's dive in. We're going to get in the weeds today, which is fun, right? So I have made what I'm discussing today downloadable for you. You can get a handout to follow along, as well as the handout that you can use to guide your conversation with your own clients, as well as the exact calculator, aka spreadsheet, that I use every day with my clients for this concept by going to financialcoachacademy.com/savings rate. financialcoachacademy.com/savings rate. I highly recommend downloading that and following along as we tackle this topic. Finally, I shoot for about 30 minutes per episode. Bill, my producer, is probably questioning my efforts a bit as I say that, but I really do try. I promise. I'm just terrible at that sometimes. So that means I'm going to fly through this concept. Keep in mind, you want this to be a discussion with your client. It will often take 2, maybe even 3 coaching sessions to fully explore this topic. In other words, a lot longer than 30 minutes. I am going to be bringing more financial concepts such as this to the podcast, and based on how this episode goes, I may need to break a concept down over multiple episodes. So we'll just see how this goes. All right, so back to the concept on savings rates and or your financial progress number. I will typically introduce this concept around the same time that I introduce net worth. They are both ways of looking at your overall financial position, but from different perspectives. Some clients love their net worth and really connect with that number. Others really love their savings rate and connect with that perspective. And that's why I like introducing both, because some clients do ultimately enjoy both. I've observed, though, that people who are competitive in nature or sort of see things as mini challenges or games that they can play with themselves, a concept such as this can be really great for them. Another good time to introduce a client to their savings rate or financial progress number is when they're in the process of paying off debt, but they're close to hitting that milestone. So they haven't hit it yet, but they're getting close. So they can sort of look out a few months and see that they're going to have their debt paid off pretty soon. It can be common for some clients to not care as much about their savings when they're really focused on debt. Typically, they have a minimum amount going to savings and the rest is going towards paying off debt or making progress on their debt. So at that time, just before they're going to be shifting their focus to be more on savings, that's a good time to introduce this concept. More of that in just a minute. Lastly, I'll say another great time to introduce this concept is when a client is feeling discouraged or when progress feels slow. It can be easy to overlook the various ways the client is making progress. For example, if they're contributing to their 401k, it's easy to skip right over that, right? This concept that we're going to do today can really help them to see that it's not all bad, that there are some things working in their favor, and the culmination of all of those things make a big difference, that they're doing okay and they're making progress in ways that they maybe don't always see. So first, we're going to start with the education phase. So I start by letting the client know that I want to show them another way of looking at and better understanding their financial position. I tell them that it can be really common to lose sight of the progress we're making, and it can be difficult to see how all the small ways here and there are really adding up. This exercise helps us to see that more clearly. I then explain what the definition of the savings rate is. And here's the definition I share. And again, this is on your handout. The standard definition of your savings rate is the amount of money expressed as a percentage that a person deducts from their disposable income to set aside as a nest egg for their retirement. That is the actual definition, coach. Now, I want you to imagine for a second that you are a person who hasn't felt super confident with money over your life. You possibly feel a little intimidated by financial jargon, but you have a desire to learn about money. And then someone says, let's talk about that the amount of money expressed as a percentage that a person deducts from their disposable income to set aside as a nest egg or for retirement. Womp womp. That is not motivating to anyone, friends, I promise. I think one job that we all have is to make financial concepts relatable. I'll typically say that definition to a client and kind of give them this look like, doesn't sound so exciting, does it? How I think of this concept, and this is what I'll tell the client, is that it's how much of your income goes toward your own financial progress. How much of your income goes towards your future? We typically say it as a percentage, but another way of thinking about that is for every $1 you make, so for every buck of income, how much of that $1 goes towards your future or your financial progress? Ideally, of course, the more of every dollar you make that goes toward your future, the better. But you also want to enjoy life today. So there's a balance here, right? I like having us start by at least knowing your number, then seeing how we can strengthen it over time. How does that sound, right? Remember, our job is to continuously create buy-in for our clients. The reason they should know their savings rate isn't because it's a smart calculation to do. Why is it good for them to know? That's what we always want to be thinking about. Here's just a little side tangent. Here's how I think about my role oftentimes as a financial coach is that I feel like I'm a salesperson, and not because I have a business and I'm selling a coaching program or an offer. That's not what I mean. Sometimes I'm a salesperson and that I'm selling a financial concept to a client. I'm trying to find the reason they will care about it and want to know more about that concept. If you think about budgeting or debt payoff or saving more or net worth, goal setting, all of those things you and I probably geek out on, think of your job, coach, as selling those to your clients. How can you get your clients to want to buy them, right? How can you get them bought in or excited about those concepts? All too often, that comes from how you talk about that concept. I'm always thinking about that when it comes to money and financial concepts. So right away, when I introduce something, before I even dive into it, I think about how to make it enticing so the client is excited to explore it. So I'll usually say something like, let me give you a bit more information to sort of frame this in your mind. If we were to look at the federal savings rate, that figure is 4.1%. And I will literally pull this up during the coaching session. I put a link to where you can find this in the show notes, and it's also on the handout, but it's at the St. Louis Fed website, also called FRED, okay? But I have it bookmarked and linked on the handout that I use specifically for this concept. So I will pull it up during the coaching session and show the client exactly what we're looking at. So I'll show them exactly where I got that 4.1% figure. I looked at that today before I recorded this episode. It does fluctuate from one month to the next. And some things I continue with the client that you may or may not have heard people say is that a strong savings rate is between 10 to 20%. Have you ever heard people say that you should save 15% of your income or anything along those lines? So what I'm doing is I'm trying to make it a discussion, right? I want to see where they're at. What have they heard? Maybe what haven't they heard? I don't want to make any assumptions about their foundational knowledge or awareness on this concept. If they say they've heard that before, I'll usually ask something like, and what do you think of that? When you hear it, what do you think, right? Here's why this matters, coach. Most people have heard the same stuff that you and I are saying, but they simply don't give it any thought when they hear it. Your conversation with your client has to be different. You want the conversation you're having about it to penetrate, to go deeper, right? So don't gloss over it because that's what's already happening a lot of the times. So I'll continue with the client. While it's fine to know these numbers that I just shared with them, the federal savings rate and also sort of the general rule of thumb, I really never like the idea of determining what you're doing by comparing it to what others are doing. Today, we're going to discover your savings rate number, and the goal is simply to strengthen it little by little. The way savings rate is calculated has some pros and cons to it. Pros are that it's simply one more building block that you can use to gain insights on your finances. It provides awareness and yet another way that we can challenge ourselves to do better, and it helps prevent lifestyle creep. The cons are that it typically focuses on retirement or investments only, and oftentimes savings rates are spoken about in comparison speak when the goal should be to improve or strengthen our own savings rates, not compare ourselves to others. So the way we calculate your savings rate is less about savings specifically and more about your financial progress number. We take all the ways you are currently making financial progress, which can be putting money to savings or paying down debt, and we use those when we calculate your savings rate. Are you ready to see your savings rate number? So that is typically how I talk about this concept with a client, is everything I just said. So now what we're going to do, coach, is we're going to move into the application phase of the coaching concept. So this is when we're actually calculate their savings rate. But first, I'm going to explain the formula again, but with a bit more detail. Then we're going to input their figures and really talk about it and make sure we're applying it to their situation. Like I said at the top of this episode, I have a spreadsheet that I've created that helps guide this conversation. And so you will really want to be looking at that while we continue the rest of this episode. You can get that at financialcoachacademy.com/savings rate, where you can download not only the spreadsheet, but also the handout that goes along with it. Okay, I tell the client, your savings rate is going to be all of the money you have going towards your financial progress divided by your net income. In this instance, your net income represents the money you have a choice what to do with. So that's why we're going to remove your taxes from your income. In other words, it's all the ways you're improving your financial position divided by your net income. It can be a little hairy to calculate this, but don't worry, I'm going to do it with you. The important thing to know at this point is that your savings rate really tells you the percentage of your income that you are using to make financial progress. So you ready to see what it is? Any guess as to what your percentage might be before we calculate it? Typically, we start with just the prior few months, so really one quarter. If the client loves what this shows them after we've done that, or if they get a one-time big amount to where they contribute to savings or their debt due to, let's say, a big commission check they get once a year or some other random source of income that isn't consistent, like a big federal tax refund or something, then we'll do it for more months, or we'll keep it updated once per month going forward after this initial concept. So coach, you'll notice on the spreadsheet that it will say, here's how we calculate savings rate. We've got gross income from all sources less taxes paid, which equals their net income. Then I total up all their contributions to financial progress, which includes money going to savings, not that will be spent. So if you have money going into like a car repair fund, so if you do sinking funds, we don't count those types of savings accounts. This is truly like emergency savings only, money that is going into savings with the intention to sit there. 401k contributions, money going to debt principal, so typically the amount over the minimum payment, let's say, money going to investments, IRA contributions, principal payments to their mortgage or student loans, essentially anything. One way of thinking about this is anything that would impact the client's net worth. We're going to include it in the savings rate calculation, okay? Notice I said principal amount of debt payments. The idea is that while not all the student loan payment you're making each month goes to the principal, some of it does, and we don't want to dismiss that. It's all helping to make financial progress and should be celebrated, right? Another reason we include amounts going to principal on debt is because once the debt is paid off, if they were to spend that money instead, they would actually see a decline in their savings rate. But if they take some of that and contribute it to their savings or investments, in other words, another form of financial progress, their savings rate will stay the same. They may want to loosen the reins some, of course, but this calculation before they get out of debt really helps clients stick to making progress after they become debt-free, and it helps them to not backslide into some old habits. It's a form of personal accountability and just one more way the client can assess what and how they're doing financially, okay? It's the biggest argument for including debt principal payments in a savings rate calculation, if you ask me. Although I know many financial experts would say, you're not saving that money. Yeah, but we want them to be saving that, right? I can actually say, imagine once your debt is paid off, 20% of your income will be going to you and your future. Imagine how fast you'll see your savings grow then, right? So I take the total of their financial progress, divide it by their net income to get the percentage of their income that is going to their financial progress. Again, make sure you're looking at this visually while we're going through it because it does get a little hairy. Now, for business owners, again, super hairy here, we look at their savings rate in a slightly different way. We start with business revenue and then we remove true business expenses. So here's what I mean by true business expenses. I pay for my coach and personal trainer out of my business because my accountant says that I can based on my niche. But I would pay for my coach even if I didn't have a business. It's a personal expense that I'm simply allowed to pay out of my business, so I do. Therefore, it is not a true business expense. And there might be a number of these things. Cell phone, for example, home internet, vehicle expenses, things you'd likely still have even if you weren't a business owner. But payroll for my team, various software that I pay for, those types of things are true business expenses. If I closed my business tomorrow, I would not even have those things, right? The goal here is to get to net business revenue, but we also don't want to get too in the weeds of doing this every single month. So here's how I typically do this with my clients, my business clients specifically. When we do the savings rate calculation, we total up one time the expenses that the client pays for out of their business, but that they would still have even if they close the business tomorrow. We do that just one time, like I said. Then on the savings rate calculation, we use that every single time. It may fluctuate a bit, but likely not enough to be overly concerned about it. Don't be so obsessed with being so accurate that you overwhelm the client and lose sight of the bigger picture of why you're trying to identify this number. You want to know the number so that you can improve it. So you're really overall looking for the trend line, right? So we take their business revenue, we subtract the true expenses. Everything Left is the income they actually had choices as to how they spent, saved, or what they did with inside of their business. That's how we get to net business revenue, right? So we're going to remove any expenses that are not true business expenses, right? Anything that is like personal, but I get to pay for it out of the business because I have a business, right? We all know that there are some of those, but I'm going to have them anyway. I subtract those to get to my true revenue number that I then get to decide how I'm going to spend it and be as efficient as possible when it comes to running my business, okay? So let me give you an example of this. Let's take someone who makes shirts for their business, okay? Let's say they charge $40 per shirt. The shirt costs $12 and printing costs $3. Let's pretend this business has no other expenses. Probably not realistic, but for simplicity's sake, let's just roll with it. So the total cost of the shirt is $15. The net revenue then is $25 per shirt. That $25 is actually what the business owner can choose what they do with, not the whole $40, right? For the savings rate calculation, the number we're trying to get to for the business is that $25 number, okay? On the savings rate calculator, you'll see that we'll also add in any other income they may have. So if a spouse works a W-2 job, for example, we'll add that, and then we'll subtract taxes to get their total net income for their household. Then we calculate how much is going to financial progress in all the same ways we would for individuals or couples. But perhaps they also have business debt that they're paying down or business savings they're funding that we would count as well. We take their total financial progress amount and we divide it by their total net income to get the percentage of their income that's going to financial progress. So a little bit more, it's a bit technical, if you will. And for a lot of our clients, it can be really overwhelming, which is why we are typically doing this entire exercise with them right during the session, or really what I will say is that we're doing it for them. So I'm sort of narrating what I'm doing in the numbers while I'm filling out the form during the coaching session. So I might say something like, okay, let's look at your student loan account. Go ahead and log in and let's go look at your last payment amount. How much of that went to principal? So I'm really asking for them to go get the information and then I'm figuring out where we're putting it, okay? They'll tell me, and then I'll use that for my calculation. The client is absolutely part of the process, but we as the coach are leading the exercise, okay? So I don't have time to give you a very specific example here. There is an example in the Financial Coaching Toolkit lesson for this concept. So if you are interested, you can go to financialcoachingtoolkit.com. You'll see one that is titled Coaching on the Fundamentals of Personal Finance. That is where you can find this concept as well as a number of other ones. And there is a very specific example that we go through in the video for this concept. And again, that's financialcoachingtoolkit.com. You're looking for the one that says Coaching on the Fundamentals of Personal Finance. We do consider this one of the fundamental exercises that we do with our clients at Fiscal Fitness. This entire toolkit, the fundamentals of personal finance, is also included in the Financial Coach Academy. It's one of the 4 that are included. So you could just enroll in the academy as well if you want all of the business tools as well. Okay, so once we're done with that step, we can then move on to the next phase of this coaching concept. Again, this was all about the application phase, right? Like we're actually calculating the number. This is where we really begin to drive home the concept and where most clients tend to love it. So once we've calculated their savings rate, I will tell them what it is. I'll usually say something like this. Your savings rate is 18%. That means for every $1 you make, 18 cents goes to strengthening your financial position. The other 82 cents is going to living, bills, expenses, lifestyle costs. I also like to point out other figures on the calculation, such as the total amount that goes towards financial progress. So like the dollar amount, not just the percentage, the amount of their income that they have to work with each month. So without taxes, right? Those types of things. And I'll typically say something like, I'm curious, what do you think of that 18%? Is it higher or lower than you were anticipating? How do you feel about one, knowing your financial progress number and that it's 18%, right? And I allow them to share with me what they're thinking. Is it better or worse than they expected? Are they proud of it? Are they disappointed? And once we have a moment to discuss their current savings rate and their reaction to it, I move on to the next section of this coaching concept. All of this is still part of the application or the coaching phase of this concept. So really quickly, Coach, before I tell you what this next step is, I want to do a quick check-in. How many of you would sort of stop right now? So you calculate savings rate, you explain, first of all, what it is to the client, and then you calculate it, or let's say we're talking about net worth. So you calculate net worth and you tell somebody what it is, and then you sort of consider the concept done. So the client knows something, but that's it. How can you take your financial concepts just one step further? I really want to encourage you to keep asking yourself that question when it comes to the work you are doing with your clients. Here's what I've come up with for this concept specifically when I've asked myself that question. How can I take this just one step further? How can I go just a little deeper with this concept? And feel free to use this step with your clients as well. So for me, next I tell them that there's something I'd like to calculate with all of my clients. I like to see what dollar amount would it take to increase your savings rate by just 1%. So instead of 18%, how can we get it to 19%? I will typically say something here about how strengthening our financial position happens by making small, consistent decisions over time. It doesn't always have to involve massive overhauls or sacrifices, but a continuous focus on up-leveling little by little. In fact, we're able to see that in this concept. The extra that goes to debt each month, by paying their mortgage on time and diligently, by transferring money to their savings account or funding their 401k, all of those small amounts and ways add up to get them the savings rate that they currently have. What I want to do is encourage that in an intentional way, and simply by asking, what would it look like dollar amount wise if you took your savings rate from 18 to 19%? I really want to make it as tangible as possible. So at this point, I'll usually ask, should we see what 1% more would look like? Or is there another percentage that you would like to see? So sometimes a client will want to reach a particular milestone. So let's say this client is at 18%. Maybe they're the type of person who says, let's see what it would take to get it to 20%, right? That's a cool number. In that case, we will actually do both. I want them to see what just 1% incremental increases would look like, but I also want them to explore and gain awareness of what it would take to hit a new milestone. So we want to calculate that 1% increase. To calculate a 1% increase, I take their net income on the savings rate tool and I multiply it by 1% or 0.01. And you'll see this is listed on the worksheet and handout provided. I typically talk to the client about how I'm doing this, but I'm doing it for them. Okay, so this gives me a dollar amount, which is what I'm after. Translating something from 1% to an actual dollar amount makes it much more tangible for the client. Percentages don't have enough meaning oftentimes. So we have to attach an actual number to it, both from a total perspective. So you save X per year or per month, and also the dollar amount to increase it by to reach that 1%. Okay. So then I translate those findings to the client. For example, I might say something like this. In order to go from 18% to a 19% savings rate, that would require $55 more per month going towards your financial progress. What do you think of that? And we talk about it. Oftentimes, the number seems minuscule in the grand scheme of things because remember, we're using net income as well, and we're talking about just 1%. Then we do the same thing, but based on the number the client is interested in seeing. So in this example, a 2% increase to hit a milestone. And if so, what does that translate to in a dollar amount? I have never had someone stop at just 1% because it's usually a small enough amount or number that they just want to see what more looks like. And I want them to see exactly what that would take and then ask them what they think of it, because once they see it, they can't unsee it, right? I want them to see that it doesn't take that much more effort to bump it by just 1%. I want to show them how easy it is to increase and take their percentage and put a dollar amount to it as well. This step shows them what's possible and how easy it is to increase it by just 1% more. Knowing the number is one thing, coach. Knowing how to influence the number is much more powerful. Are you helping your clients really see how to influence their own financial position? Does that give anyone else chills? When I think about how that is my job, I literally get giddy thinking about it. In a nutshell, that is the difference. What I just explained is the difference between financial education and financial coaching. Education is knowing the number. Coaching is influencing the number. So once we've done that, we can then move on to the next phase, which is the commitment phase of this concept. Chances are you will find yourselves going straight into the commitment phase once you ask the client what they think of that last number, that 1% number, that dollar amount, because chances are they'll start saying something like, I could probably cut, insert any expense, right? And get really close to $55. In other words, they're already thinking about what they can do in order to commit to increasing their savings rate, right? In the commitment phase, we're always asking the client, what do you want to do about this new knowledge and awareness that you just gained, right? That is true here as well for this concept. They may want to try and increase their savings rate by 1% to 2% right then. Some clients certainly feel empowered to do that right away. If that's the case, the next question we ask is, what are some areas we could cut back, reduce, challenge, adjust, eliminate, or negotiate to find that amount? That's really the question we're asking if they are ready to take action. We will go through their spending and see if we can't find the exact dollar amount that represents 1%, and we will direct it towards their financial progress. The client may, though, not want to make changes right then, but set a goal for a future date. They may have say something like, I'd like to work on increasing my savings rate 1% over the coming 3 months. In other words, they want to take their time and not make drastic cuts. Other times, a client may want to revisit their savings rate in a few months. This can happen if they're in a very busy or chaotic time of life, or perhaps in the middle of a big transition of some kind. It may just feel like one more thing they don't need right now, and just knowing their savings rate is good enough for now. That's okay too. But all of these courses of action are essentially what the commitment phase is all about. Now that you know your savings rate and you know what it would look like to increase it by 1% or more, what do you want to do about it, if anything? We help the client think through that and get clear on it. And then we write out the specific plan in their master document. So we're all on the same page with their action steps, timelines, goals, and those types of things. And then I bring the concept to a close. Tell me what you think. Was this helpful? Eye-opening? Did you gain awareness or clarity? Are there any particular observations that you'd like to share with me? How are you feeling now that you know your savings rate number? Any observations that you want to share about what you're thinking or how you're feeling, right? Those are just a few of the questions that I might ask. And here are some common answers when it comes to this concept. Some people love their savings rate number. Others are just like, it's just one other way of looking at their finances. And some people will love it, and some people will prefer net worth, like I was saying at the top of the episode. I remind them that this was all about their long-term financial health, and it helps to focus on progress. It's really nice for some people to see their progress as a number, right? It can also motivate people to get out of debt quickly because they can see that if the debt is gone, that percentage is now freed up to go to savings or to their future. It helps hold people accountable once debt is paid off to keep that money going towards their financial health and not being spent afterwards. So typically they're pleasantly surprised, like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. Or, oh, when it comes to increasing at 1%, oh, I could totally do that. It seems so much simpler and easier than they realized. And they may want to stretch themselves to hit a new milestone. So if they're at 3%, how can they get to 5%, right? Also, the client is aware that short-term goals are great, but long-term perspective is important too. And it deserves our attention just as much as the short-term goals that they may be working towards right now, right? And that is how we bring the concept to a close. And that is their financial progress number, otherwise oftentimes talked about as savings rate. I know I put a little bit of a new spin on it. I hope you like it. I hope it's something that you introduce with your clients. Please let me know. So in the next episode, I am really excited. We're going to talk about the person who has influenced my business more than anyone. He is a famous person, but he's not a business coach or marketing guru or really an expert in entrepreneurship at all. Yet what he has shared about how he does his work has had a profound effect on my business and my ability to work so closely with clients to help them get the results that I have over the years. So I'm going to tell you about who this person is and what this impact has been on me as I've reflected over the past year on my business, how I started, how I got to where I am today, the bumps along the way, the highlights along the way. Him and his philosophies has had the most profound positive impact, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let's explore your reflection question for today's episode, Coach. Coaching is all about figuring out what you think of something, how that impacts how you feel, and the actions you take. So I like to end every episode with a question for you to reflect on. The purpose is to help you gain clarity on today's topic, but it also creates the opportunity for you to share your thoughts with me. I would love to hear from you. If you are watching on YouTube, drop a comment with your answer to today's question, or you can join the conversation in our free community for financial coaches called Financial Coaches Unite. And you can find the link to that group in the show notes of this episode. Here's your question, Coach. What is your financial progress number, and what do you think of that? So today we talked about coaching your clients on this number, but I want you to put yourself through this exercise. Or better yet, find another coach who wants to coach you through this, and then you can trade and coach them through it. I think it would be a great way to practice this concept. I believe financial coaching is the best and most rewarding way to make a living. I truly love what I do. If you are ready to learn and see how to become a profitable, successful financial coach, check us out at financialcoachacademy.com. As always, I love hearing from you. If you have any questions for the podcast or to share your thoughts on the reflection question from today's episode, go to financialcoachacademy.com/podcast. And if you love this podcast, please hit the thumbs up button on today's episode, subscribe on YouTube, and leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world to me. I'll see you next week, Coach.